Welcome back. We hope you've had an absolutely splendid half an hour break and have had an absolutely wonderful day as well today at the Be More Digital Fundraising Day. Welcome everybody. Say hello on the chat. Let me know what you had for your lunches if you had anything. I had a ramen, as I was told by David, but he told me I also didn't add spring onions to it, so it wasn't very good, essentially, really. But we've got a really great session coming up now. So I'm going to pass you all over onto Alan, David, and Thea, who are going to be taking us through how to get the most out of your core donors by optimizing user journeys. Make sure to get your questions in. Hello, all.
Hello. So, welcome. I'm David Spector from Trillium, Head of Digital Services, and I get very excited about optimizing user journeys, as you shall learn in the next few minutes. But before that, I'll allow my erstwhile colleague, Alan Perestrello, to introduce Trillium and what we do. Alan has a look of bemusement on his face, as if he can't hear anything at the moment. So I'm just hoping that he can shortly. Can everyone see and hear me? First question. Excellent. Thank you, Nick. So, well, I think Alan's having a little bit of a problem with his audio. So in the meantime, I shall forward on just good old cheese sandwich. Just a quick question. Can you see the presentation slide? You should see a big slide. Yep, that's the one. Perfect. All right. So, perfect. Oh, we've got a very engaged audience here. It's a great start to the session. I'm not going to ask you all what you're eating for lunch because it might be quite a lengthy discussion and we'll never get to the optimization of the user journey. But I did mention that ramen can't be called ramen without having spring onions in them. So as I mentioned, I'm David Spector. Alan Perestrello, who's having trouble with his audio, is the director and co-founder of Trillium. We work very closely together and very much are driven by the idea that experience is the most important aspect of any interaction. So you can see our strapline is experience matters. And in order to understand experience, you really have to understand people. So the objectives here is really of this session is to share our perspective from the point of view of how we would endeavor to understand an audience and what they're trying to get out of any interaction. In this case, it's a donor and someone who's already engaged, and how to maintain that engagement, because we've recognized the value of an already engaged individual. And then, of course, to see if you have got anything to add to the discussion in terms of generating a debate. And all of this is with a view to driving some sort of change. Now, change is incremental, and one of the things we always say to anyone we're working with is you need to set yourself small, achievable goals. So hopefully at the end of this, you'll have something that you can take away and put into action immediately. It's not technical. It doesn't require more resource than available time from someone to actually say, we're going to do this. It's important because of this reason. And at the end of it, you end up with a much better result for the people who support your cause. So as a business, Alan, have you got your audio now?
I am back. Thank you, David. Yes.
All right. I'll hand back over to Alan. Otherwise, he will have had no use in this whole presentation. And I love
thanks, David.
My colleague.
That's always what I wanted to know, is that I have no purpose in life. Thank you. So thank you, David. Yes. So fundamentally, picking up what David was saying, he's pretty much done everything I was going to do anyway. But for us, it's really important that we get across the message that experience matters. And so experience matters for us means many things. It can mean everything from your experience working with us to our experience in the sector, our experience with technology. It's a multifaceted statement, but we do try and imbue it in everything that we do. And hopefully that comes across today, because really one of the topics that David's going to be leading on is really about how experience can change, optimizing those user journeys for your core donors. So just wanting to take a look at who we work with and what we do. We're a multifaceted provider. We do quite a lot in the CRM space, using predominantly Microsoft Dynamics 365, couple of ancillary technologies around Azure. But David leads our digital and experience teams, which is predominantly around digital consultancy and also building out those digital solutions. A lot of our digital solutions tend to be self-service oriented. And also we do quite a lot with our charity clients around optimizing those donor journeys. So this topic is really fundamentally right up David's street. So who do we do it for? We work for a broad selection of organizations. Some of those are going to be well known. Some of them are probably names that you can get to grips with. But the vast majority of those clients on screen, there are clients that we are doing some sort of user journey optimization, specifically around their self-service journeys and how that translates into the CRM, because not only do we want to build great user experience focused user journeys, but we also want to be able to record and store that data and allow you, the charities, to do great segmentation and optimization on the data that we capture. So that's a common theme for a lot of our clients on screen. So why focus on retaining donors? We looked at a study produced by About Loyalty, which is a really fascinating research capability organization, and looking at a 3-year study measuring the impact of donor loyalty on giving and the impact on giving. So with every 1 point of increase in loyalty, you can look to establish kind of an increase of 15% more donors that continue to give after 3 years. Because more loyal donors also gave more, 20% more total income was accrued over a 3-year period, which results in a 9% increase in the number of people wanting to include your organization in their will. Now, obviously, this was from a legacy perspective, and that's the study. But I think there's obviously some correlations for all aspects of donation and fundraising management that lessons that can be learned there. So really looking at what the results are of that 3-year study, what About Loyalty did was they looked at how loyalty can impact positively on donor giving. And so what they did is they assigned loyalty scores of between 1 and 7 to over 5,000 individual donors across 12 charities. And when they did that, they found that even a small increase in loyalty led to a big increase in results. So more donations, more income, and an increase in legacy gifts through a small achievement and a small improvement in improving kind of the loyalty piece. And I guess for anyone that's ever heard of something called Pareto's principle, which is commonly referred to as the 80-20 rule, that's really about kind of 80% of your revenue can come from 20% of your donors. So how do we make those 20% the most loyal we can? So there are 3 factors that came out of the study in terms of influencing what that loyalty is: commitment, satisfaction, and trust. And today, primarily, we're going to be focusing on donor satisfaction through optimizing user journeys. So I'm going to hand over to David in a second, and he'll explain to you how you can find positive donor experiences that also drive commitment and trust through the organization.
Thank you, Alan. And I think it's important to note that whilst we might be having a bit of a focus on satisfaction, as a consequence of providing satisfactory experiences, you build commitment and trust in particular. If I think it's true to say, if you have any interaction online or via mobile with an organization and it's fluid and you've gotten out of it what your expectation was when you started that interaction, you have a greater sense of trust, and it means you come back and you're willing to engage more and more into the future. So in order to evaluate donor satisfaction, well, we have to understand what the touch points are in terms of a donation journey. So this varies, of course, in terms of whether it's an existing donor or someone who hasn't ever engaged with your organization to begin with, and you're trying to attract them to the cause. But fundamentally, there'll be a number of points in the journey from where they find their awareness to the point where they execute some sort of action that you want them to, and also that's beneficial to them. So it really starts with an understanding of user needs, and also understanding what they are not so happy with. So in terms of experience, I think we can all say there's certain things we've come across on the web via an app that we said, why is it like that? Why is this not better? Why is it not easier? Why are you asking me these questions in order to get this little piece of information or to allow me to retrieve something that I wouldn't have wanted to tell you? All of this stuff you're asking me for. So things like that, we can find out anecdotally. And of course, you could do surveys and focus groups, but there'll be some that are very well known to begin with and that you can potentially look at what are ways to address. And there'll be others that you're not fully aware of, but through an exercise of mapping the journey from start to finish, you'll be able to find out in a more defined manner. So in terms of how we would improve donor satisfaction, obviously we want to look at the journey, the touch points, and where the opportunities are for us to make improvements. And that leads on to a prioritization of effort, because I think it would be true for, I think, everyone on this call that there's a limited amount of resource in terms of time and budget, both in terms of internal resource availability, but as well how much you can spend on a third party to help. So prioritization is a very important factor. You can't do everything well at the same time. So what you need to do is understand what needs to be addressed with the most immediacy, and then work your way from that sort of level of priority to things that are lower hanging fruit, as it were. The key thing here is that everyone should within your organization also have an understanding of these user journeys, because there might be something they're doing that has an impact on the satisfaction of the end user. And I'll put this into the context that we speak a lot about things from a digital perspective. Of course, this is a digital-centric subject in terms of the forum we're presenting it in today, but there are also things that are not digital that impact the overall satisfaction. So if someone has to actually interact with a human being at some point because they can't complete everything they want to do online, how easy is it for them to get in touch with that person? So it's a mixture of both online and offline to create the almost perfect user journey. There's never perfection for everyone. I think the key thing is you have to test your changes, you have to validate them, and also don't just look at this introspectively as internal stakeholders. Always consider what this looks like from the end user's perspective, because the end user is the most important person here. And I think we do tend to have a bit of a habit of going, this is what I think it should do, whereas no one's actually asked the person who's using it or interacting with it what it should do. So there kind of 6 key points in terms of mapping out a journey of any description. And this could be a B2C commerce journey, which is someone buying something from a website like Amazon, for instance, to someone engaging as a supporter of a cause, in this instance, to be a donor. First thing is how to consider is how do they know about it? So with someone who's already an existing donor, they'll know about it because they've already made that commitment. But how do they know how valuable it has been over the course of time? If I've been donating for the last 2 years, am I aware of what difference my donation makes? That's the perceived value there. And also, are you telling me what I need to do if you require more from me? And how easy is it for me to do it? And how will I know when it's completed satisfactorily? So an example of this might be in terms of signing up for regular payments, in terms of a recurring payment method. So what we do here now is we're going to show you how this looks in the context of an example journey map. And this is something we'll provide a template for after this seminar, so that you can fill this in yourself. And this is the start of an exercise that I hope you embed into your process moving forward. So a journey map is really looking at, as I said, the touch points that someone will interact with in order to sort of meet the criteria for successful journey. So how do I find out about something? So in this instance, we're using an example user story, which says, as an existing donor, I would like to understand the impact of my donation, so I may continue whether to choose to continue donating or not. So the awareness is, how do I know that the donations I'm making are making a difference? So we look at this, and this would be true. This doesn't have to be limited, by the way, to this example. This is just really a light touch to give you an idea of how you can approach it. Each of the touch points will be somewhere that the end users interacted with content or some functionality. And the experience is what's really important, is to understand how satisfied or dissatisfied they were at any of those touch points. So in this instance here, I know about the impact of donations for a charity that I support because I can see it on their website and in their advertising and through social posts and anecdotes in a community. But I want to find out a bit more. I want it a bit more specific to what I'm interested in. So I'll go to the website and try to find out more information. But actually, it's a little bit limited. So the information architecture is not really delivering. So the navigation is hard to find my way around. I search for terms to see if I can find some impact of donations as a search term, and nothing comes up, or the stuff that comes up is completely unrelated. These are all points of frustration for an end user. So it's quite easy to understand them in advance, and then you have to evaluate how much of a difference they'll make to improving the satisfaction. So that's your opportunity. So fundamentally, actually, once you've got someone engaged, they may actually feel, oh, I found the information I wanted. It was difficult to find, but once I found it, I was really satisfied. So this hence the smiley face. And I want to continue supporting this cause. So I want to look at how I can make increase my donation or change it from something that was ad hoc to a regular monthly payment. So what provision have you given me as an end user to make that as easy as possible? Have you provided me with options to change payment methods? For instance, is there an easy way to set up or change an existing direct debit? Have you made it easy for me to find bank details so that we're using a lookup service? All of those things remove friction. And again, it's related to how much of a priority this is for your organization versus how much value you'll get out of addressing it. So if you've not really heard any people saying, oh, we've got a problem with the fact that I want to set up direct debit to donate on a monthly basis, then it's probably not a high priority for your organization. But if you've got something like that in place and it's a known obstacle, so people have gone through all of the previous steps of becoming aware, understanding why it's important to them, and then they end up going, oh, I can't actually do the thing I want to do to support you, then that's what I would consider to be a significant fail, because getting people interested is the hardest part. Usually it's actually, you need to make it as easy as possible for them to complete their journey. So at the end of everything, I also want some feedback to know that the action that I performed was successful, and also what happens next. And I think the key thing here is, in terms of maintaining a relationship with existing donors, is to try and find some way of personalizing your communication with them as you move forward, to say, we understand what you're interested in because we've been able to measure it through other interactions you've performed over the course of the last year or so. Therefore, we'll deliver you messaging and content that's related to what emotively makes a difference to you. So rather than using generic statements to try and make them a little bit more identifiable to the personas that you're trying to attract. So we've got 5 steps to optimize your donor journeys. These are not set in stone, but we've found that generally across the board, these will make a difference. And if you're not doing them already, then it's probably time to start thinking about it. If you're doing any of them, then good news, congratulations. The first one actually is super important. You can't do any of this without understanding who you're trying to engage with, and understanding the segmentation of your users also allows you to communicate far more effectively, because you can personalize communication. And you're looking at this very much from a human point of view. You're looking at people and saying, what is it that moves a person? What makes them want to do something? And that's going to make them get off their chair or stay on their chair, because we don't have to leave our chairs to do anything, but get on their phone and go, okay, I want to find out more about this, and then arguably commit to some sort of donation amount on a regular basis. So also, how would they like to be communicated with? What's their preferred method of communication? They may like emails, is still very prevalent in this world, email campaigns, but also social media. Are you utilizing those as best as you can? And do you understand what you need to provide in order to get a conversion out of the end user? Now, that all leads on very nicely to the fact that you need to make use of your analytics and insights. So if we've got a definition of the people that we're trying to attract and retain, how do we measure the success or otherwise? And if you're not measuring stuff, you really don't have a great starting point to validate decision making. So with any sort of measurement, certainly from a web perspective, what you're looking to understand is what's successfully converting from when someone starts the journey. So if you remember those steps that I showed you before with the touch points, you'll always find that there's a touch point in particular that's resulting in a much larger drop-off in terms of how many people could have completed the journey and therefore became a registered donor, as it were. So where you look at those touch points and you say, these things aren't working, those are the bits where you really want to start focusing. But your analytics will tell you that story in a way that is very hard to argue with. So I always find that a lot of the time, without data to back up a hypothesis, it's an opinion, but when you've got the data, it becomes a fact. So if you're not measuring everything you can, you really want to, as soon as this call finishes, go and talk to whoever it is who implements this stuff and say, what are we measuring? Are we measuring as much as we can? And if we're not, how much extra effort would it take to measure stuff? Beyond your standard web analytics that you'd see with something like Google Analytics, there's also ways of looking at user behaviors. For instance, Hotjar is a little plugin that will show you where people are clicking on a page, and it'll show you how long they're staying on certain elements trying to complete actions. So it's a mixture of all of these analytical methods, but the consolidation of that data allows you to have a very informed way to approach improvement in the future. A key thing here in any journey of any description, in this case donor journeys, but anywhere where you're trying to get someone to convert from just having found out about something to actually committing to something, is to reduce friction wherever you can. So we saw in the example journey map, there were areas there where you might say, oh, this is much harder than it should be. This form is asking me for too much information. Why do you need to find out? Why do I need to provide you with 7 bits of personal information when all I'm really interested in is giving you an email address and a payment method so that you can take some money off me? Why do you need to ask any more? Why do you need to ask for my address, for instance? There may be really valid reasons, but if you're asking for certain bits of information that you can prove analytically are causing people to drop off a journey, then consider if A, you have to ask for it, and B, if you do have to ask for it, explain why you're asking for it on the page that you're asking for it, because most users will find that much easier to deal with than just being presented with a very verbose form and not knowing why you're trying to capture all of that information. So a key thing in the reduction of friction is just to not overwhelm end users and also provide them with instruction where things aren't clear. As I mentioned before, this is really the nuts and bolts of making sure people continue to donate, is to demonstrate the impact of their donations historically. And this can be done in a number of ways. I think if you've got good audience segmentation, you can understand which personas are donating for what reasons, and then you can provide personalized content that really plays to that. And it says, okay, this is an area that you're interested in, and this is how donations to our organization have impacted this area, and this is how they've benefited the people in need. That, for me, is probably one of the strongest things you can do in terms of maintaining a continual relationship with existing donors. And it's a mixture of data and, of course, smart messaging and good content. So all of this does require good quality content to be a success. And you can never sort of negate the fact that without good content, no good tech works as well as it should. So tech on its own doesn't solve problems. Good content and an understanding of end users and their needs does. So finally, out of our 5 steps is to make sure you communicate clearly and with a regularity. And that doesn't mean to spam people, but it does mean to let them know when there's something that's related to what they're interested in and the reason that they got engaged with you in the first place, to make sure that you're keeping in touch, because ultimately it's quite easy to send very generic messages that make it seem like, okay, well, you're sending this to everyone, but I want you to kind of talk to me. So you also want to make sure that it's very clear that you're appreciative of any donation that someone makes and that you don't just take it for granted. So ultimately, 5 steps. None of these are technical, by the way. I think you've noticed, with the exception of analytics, because you have to have a tool in place to take measurements. But ultimately, you don't need to ask a developer to help with any of this. You need to just have a strategic approach to how you will address each of these areas. And if you just do a little bit to start with, you'll still be in a better position than if you did none of it at all. So I was basically tasked with making sure I finished this in good time, because normally I can talk about this for many, many hours, if not days. I'm sure Alan would attest to that. But we wanted to open up the floor to some questions and answers if anyone's got any. you're welcome to drop them into the chat, and we will attempt to answer as many questions as we can in the 5 minutes we've got left. Just finally on this presentation, we'll provide you a download link to download the journey map template. So basically it will be a blank version of this, and you can start filling it in with detail that's specific to your organization and the challenges that you're facing. And as a starting point, this is something you could absolutely share across the organization. And it shows a mindset and an approach to thinking about the solution to an issue or a challenge, which I think will go down very well with most people, because there's nothing technical about it, and it's really about understanding the end user. So over to my wonderful audience for any questions you might have.
Cool. Thanks, David. So there is a question come through from an anonymous user, said, "Hi there. I started working from a small charity in March of this year, and they have no analytics at all."
Ouch.
I know that we need to redesign our website. It's obvious, but should we set up web analytics on the existing website before the redesign, or start from scratch?
100%.
I have a view, but you're the analytics guru, so you lead.
I wouldn't say I'm a guru at anything, but I would say that there's no bad time to set up analytics. So analytics is typically related to a domain when it comes to websites. So it'll be www.trillium.net. Analytics is related to trillium.net. Now, if I move to a new site and I'm using something else, but I've got the same domain, those analytics will still be relevant. The way you've set it up, you can still transfer it and have your historical data. So the answer to your question is set it up as soon as you can. It's a very straightforward task to set up Google Analytics on any website. And I'm hoping that it won't be too arduous for whoever's doing your development for you, but there's no better time than now. In fact, yesterday is the best time to set up analytics.
Yeah. One thing to bear in mind is that when you go to the new website, you might want to create a new analytics profile, just so that you've got the old and the new to keep track of, but you don't have to. You know, there are many ways to do it, and whoever you use to help you with the website should be able to help you with that. So we've got another question from Megan Seymour. She said, "How do we get a good picture of your different personas in a way that is GDPR compliant?"
That's a really good question. Well, I mean, there's an understanding of end users anyway through what I would call typical user research. So you look at focus groups, you could send out surveys, you can put all of your disclaimers around how that information will be used. But fundamentally, you'll already have an understanding of your personas based on the people you're trying to attract now. So that's always a starting point. GDPR, there's nothing about persona definition that includes any actual information about real people. They are fictitious definitions of people. So where you might have someone in mind, whereas I can possibly come up with a persona for a wonderful head of an organization, which would be Alan Perestrello on this call. I'm not going to say it's Alan. I just have him in mind as someone that I'm going to define a persona around. And you can do that absolutely for anyone that you're already aware of who engages with your organization. The key thing about personas is that they are fictitious, but the underlying premise is that it's fiction based on facts. So you kind of have a starting point about people you know you've engaged with historically, and you use those to create a definition that's kind of written down so that people can say, okay, I understand the needs of this individual, but it never needs to expose any personal information at all, and it's completely anonymized. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but certainly there's no individual information that's included with a persona definition.
Cool. Thanks, David. So another question from Helen Kieran. She said, with respect to making it clear what the donations will be used for, we mostly need core costs covered now rather than a particular project. Any tips on how to make the request feel specific and concrete without ending up with a restricted donation by mistake? Really good question. So I think that comes down to an individual use case. I think it's about explaining what your cause is and your purpose is as a charity, and how the donation will help more than just your direct cause that you might be collecting for. I think that most people understand that charities are fundamentally an organization or a business, by want of a better name. So I think it's about clear signposting. I wouldn't, and this is a point for David, I wouldn't necessarily make that part of the customer journey specifically for a donation. I think that you want to try and minimize reasons for people to go, "Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Maybe I'll not donate." I think you can put that content somewhere else on your website. And I would probably suggest making it a link to something that a person could jump off at the end of the donation journey. But that's my personal opinion. David, your thoughts?
I don't disagree. I think fundamentally it's about being clever in terms of how you describe things. And if you understand your personas, you'll be able to address a message in a way that should work for them. So it's really understand. Again, like I said, this is more of a content requirement than anything else. But there's always something that will touch the pull the heartstrings of individuals if you understand enough about what makes them sort of moved.
Brilliant. So we have two other questions that have come through. I'm not sure about time-wise if we're still good to go, but I guess we'll carry on answering them until we get kicked off. So another anonymous user said, how do you go about collecting info for e-commerce customers and then optimizing product content for their journey? Is matching product categories a good idea? For example, if they're likely to buy children's toys, then content for them would show children's books, etc. as well.
But this one's a great one, because I think you see it all the time on big e-commerce sites. It's what we would call it's responding to user behaviors. So you're saying, I know something about this user, which is either explicit or implicit. So I know that they purchased X, Y, and Z in the last 3 months, and X, Y, and Z roughly sort of sit in a similar category in your example here for children's toys. So you're looking at things for children as a broad umbrella, but they're all related. I bought a children's book, I bought a children's toy. I'm going to go old school and say here a DVD. I know no one buys DVDs anymore, but if you've got those three things, you pretty much got a clear idea if this person is buying stuff related to children. They've probably got children, and therefore when they visit the website, the next time I'm going to show them some sort of banner that's related to children's products. So that's what you'd say is an explicit understanding, in that they've performed transactions in the past, and I know what these transactions are related to, so I can deliver content based on that past behavior. Now, there's an alternative to that, which is when someone hasn't bought it, you don't have any explicit information about them, but you know what they're interested in because of the pages they visited on a website. So they might have gone to a page that was for high protein shakes, and another page that was for resistance bands or something like that. I'm only using this as an example because I was looking for some resistance bands recently, not high protein shakes. I don't need any of those. I'm just a thin guy. But fundamentally, what you can say is, well, they visited these 3 pages with this type of content on it, so I know they're interested in this area in general. And the next page they visit, I'm going to show them some sort of banner that will be related to the previous 3 that they visited. So it's implied that they're interested in something because of their behavior at that moment in time, but you don't explicitly prove it because you don't actually know who they are, because they haven't logged in or anything like that. So absolutely, there are many ways to use that context of past behavior to deliver content related to those past behaviors, which is far more channeled in its approach.
Thanks, David.
Hello, Alan. The time has come, though. I'm here to stop you.
I told you we could go on for some time.
There is one more great question from Leah, but we'll try and address that separately. Go for it, Nick.
Yes. So unfortunately, I'm here to wrap things up. Thank you so much, Alan and David. That was actually brilliant, and some of the questions were brilliant as well, and the answers were also brilliant. That's a triple. I'm not going to say it again. But thank you so much for your time.
Trillion,
oh.
Something like that. Yeah. I love a good portmanteau.
But thank you everybody for attending, and thank you once again, David and Alan. The double of combining you together. That's nearly what I said there. But yes, we have now got a 10-minute break of just over 10-minute break before our next session. Thank you very much for everyone for joining as well. By the way, if anyone would like to network or have a little chat or have a virtual tea and coffee with each other, there is a networking section I mentioned earlier where you can sit down at a table and have a conversation with each other, just in case anyone wants to really dig into any of the discussions made through today there afterwards. But yes, as I mentioned, 10-minute break, and then we'll be back to lead into our last session, which is being delivered by Faisal, who will be telling us all about a case study on creating new online revenue streams. So thank you, and see you then.